First of all, let me welcome you all. This is a workshop on planning and trying to get into graduate programs. My name is Dr. Lanson, chairman of the department. I know some of you, but not all. What I would like to do, if I can possibly do this, is to give you a very broad introduction, and I want to allow a little bit of time for questions, but I would like those questions to be general questions rather than describing your own specific issues. I'll try to deal with some of the specific questions and specific issues if there's time. If not, you can make an appointment and I will try and deal with them at that point. This workshop is an annual workshop and it starts with a certain tradition. And I want to keep that tradition going. So, first, how many people in this room are freshmen? None. How many are sophomores? None. How many are juniors? Okay, maybe 40%, maybe something like that. It's good, but planning for graduate school usually takes a lot of time, and as you'll see, if you're a junior, there are a lot of things that you have to be doing. How many of you are seniors? Yeah, figures. Well, all right. To be fair, how many people have attended this workshop before? Not a lot. Oh well. Okay, I'm going to have to throw a lot of information at you and hope that some of it sticks. The reason that this workshop has been scheduled as early as it is because for those people who are thinking of applying to graduate school, some of the graduate programs require that you take the graduate record exam. As you may know, there are two different flavors of graduate record exams. There is a general exam. The general exam is a computer-based exam. There are test centers. It's expensive. You sign up. You go. You have a wide selection of times in order to take it. But some schools require a subject exam, and there's a subject exam in psychology. Now, the percentage of schools that do that is not that great. It might be as many as 20%, but you can't really predict from the programs that you're interested in whether school A will require it and school B will not. So that's the reason we're meeting as early as today, because there are the exam is offered on 3 dates. The first date is the 27th of September. So you say, well, gee, the 27th of September, that's 2 weeks away. The bad news is that the deadline for registration closed on the 22nd of August. The deadline for late registration closed on the 29th of August. And so you're too late for trying to take it at that time. So you say, well, all right, when's the second one? The second one is October 25th. Wow, that's a long time away. Yeah, the deadline for applying for it is 9/19, 10 days from now, which means that you would have to think a lot about what schools you want to apply to if those schools are going to require the subject exam. There is a late deadline, which means that it costs more, for 9/26, and so if for some reason it takes you a little longer to decide, it's a little more expensive, but you can certainly do it. But here's the kicker. The kicker is the third one that's being given is in April 18th, 2015. That's going to be after all the applications are due, processed, decisions are made, and so on. So what does it mean? It means if you have to take the subject test, you get one shot at it. Okay, and that's the reason that we're meeting today. So that for those people who are in that situation, you should be aware of the fact that the deadline is 9/19 for registration for it. And again, not every graduate school requires it, but those that do expect you to have taken the subject test. If you want more information on it, I put the website here, pretty straightforward, gre.org. And you can look up, and they give you more information about the nature of the test. Now the general test, remember the general test is the one that you do not have to make a scheduled reservation for. That is graded in 3 parts. There's a part, there is a quantitative part, there's a verbal part, and then there is an analytic part. And the quantitative and the verbal parts, I think, make the most sense. The analytic part, no one quite knows what to do with. Clearly, if you do well on the analytic part, it can't hurt. If you do badly, because it's so new, no one can say whether or not schools take that as seriously as they do the quantitative. And the verbal, clearly, from your point of view, you have to take all of it seriously. Now, the kinds of programs that you might be, one more thing about the GRE, and I cannot tell you how I got this, but somehow I got in the mail, not as chairman, but just ordinary house mail, GRE Power Prep software. And what it gives you are some sample GRE general tests. Now again, I don't know why I am the lucky person to get this in the mail. And it probably means that it's available to other people too. So what you might do is see if you visit gre.org whether or not this is available for you. Let me also comment a little bit before I get any deeper about whether or not you should take some of the courses that are offered for the graduate record exam. I'm going to give you my personal opinion. If you can handle those kinds of examinations without panicking, then my advice would be that you don't need to go in to take a course and pay $700 and so on to take the course. If, on the other hand, you need systematic desensitization, the courses are good for that. What they do is they start you off and they build you up so that you get exposed to more and more and more of the material, and then finally you get to take the equivalent of a subject test in a subject-like setting. It only works for some people, but if you're willing to pay the price, you can do it. Most people can get the information that they want about the GRE exam, but some of the books that are published. And again, I'm not sure that I would recommend any one over the other. There's Princeton Review. I'm blanking on the other ones that I've seen. But you go to your nearest bookstore, you look up the graduate record exam books, and you'll find out that they are, they give you samples of all tests. Now, to study for the subject exam, I do have some specific advice that I would think would help. That is, the subject exam is really designed around the Introductory Psychology 101 course. The questions that are asked, 85% of the questions that are asked at the level of Psychology 101. So, what you do is you get a Psychology 101 book. It doesn't have to be this year's, it could be last year's. Remember, when they created the test, they're probably using the book from 2 years before that. Read it carefully. I mean, most of you now have picked up a lot more information about psychology, but that's the level of knowledge you're expected to have. So if you get a Psychology 101 book and you read it before taking the subject exam, I think you'll find that you can handle most of the questions that are asked. And you don't have to take the Kaplan course or anything else. Okay, now, applying to graduate school, you have a lot of different options. Let me first tell you some of the possibilities, and then I'll deal with them in somewhat greater detail. One possibility is to take go into a master's program. Now, there are several different kinds of master's programs, but there's one kind of program called a terminal master's. Terminal master's means that the courses that you take, if you're ever thinking of going on, you have this sudden insight that, gee, I like this so much, maybe I should go on for a doctoral degree in the area. A terminal master's credits probably wouldn't count toward the doctoral program. The idea being that a terminal master's is to train you to do something very specifically, to work in a specific setting with a specific population, and in many cases, terminal masters will try to give you job placement at the end of their program, which is good. But again, terminal means that's it. As far as further training grows or using those credits elsewhere. Regular master's programs, non-terminal ones, you can in fact transfer credits, or try at least, if you then become interested in applying to a doctoral program. Now, I have to hedge my answer on this one because a lot depends upon the program. Just think about how universities, colleges make money. They make money by having people sitting in classes. So they're a little less likely to say, oh, we'll take all of your credits. They'll tell you things like, well, our stat course is a little more structured than the stat course you took, so maybe you should be taking our course. I'm trying not to be too cynical, but what I'm trying to do is to prepare you for the fact that if for some reason you do consider looking at doctoral programs, having taken a master's program, they'll probably not accept all of the credits that you have unless, there's a big unless. The unless is that if you know what kind of doctoral program you're really interested in, and you were to take courses at that same school, you'd be taking courses, the same courses, by the way, that the doctoral students would be taking. They can't reject their own credits. So, when you're planning your life, if you really think that somewhere down the road you can only afford a master's now, but maybe you'll consider a doctoral program at some point in the future, you might choose the master's program knowing something about the doctoral programs that that particular school offers. Now, who should take a lot of doctoral programs do not require you to have a master's degree before you come. In fact, they would actually prefer that you don't, but they will understand that some people, for one reason or another, have done that. They won't necessarily reject you because you have, but they won't give you any sort of boost for having done it. The people, again, I'm giving you my own personal view. If you're thinking that you're going to be interested in a doctoral program, I would apply to the doctoral program directly. Now, a lot depends upon the strength of your application, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But applying to a master's program, I think is best for somebody who does not have as good an undergraduate record as they could possibly get. And so you want to show people that you're capable of doing graduate level work. And so those are the people who should be applying, I think, to master's programs. If you really think that you have any interest at all in the doctoral programs, I would apply there. If for some reason you're on the edge and you're not exactly sure as to whether your record's good enough, you might cover your bets by applying to master's programs too. But again, don't feel that you have to have a master's degree in order to apply to a doctoral program, because it doesn't necessarily help. Okay, let's talk a little bit about credentials. Well, I haven't talked about doctoral programs, so let's go to that. There are two general flavors of doctoral programs. One of them, which I'm sure everybody recognizes, is a PhD program. A PhD degree is a doctorate in philosophy technically, but remember psychology emerged out of philosophy. It is a research-based degree, and that is, in addition to the coursework that you are doing, you're expected to do research, you're expected to make some sort of individual contribution to the field, you write this up, you do a thesis, you defend your thesis, and if all goes well, you come up with a degree. The big issue is going to be how long is it going to take them? And I cannot answer that question. That depends a lot upon you and how much time and effort you're willing to put into it. It depends upon luck. There are a lot of factors that go into how long it takes to get a PhD degree. I've had students that have taken 3.5 years. That's unusual. More likely number maybe somewhere between 5, 6 years. A lot depends upon research. If you're working with somebody who is has a very active laboratory and who helps guide you and so on. That might speed the process up. If you're working with the only person in that particular institution that is working in that area, a lot depends upon how active that individual is. And of course, there's also the risk that if that person then gets a good job offer from some other school, and that person leaves, then you have a problem. Sometimes people take their students with them, sometimes not. It depends upon the way things go. So, how long does it take to get a PhD degree? Depends on you. Depends on, as I say, luck. I know people who took a long, long time because they thought that they knew how to do a project. It turns out that regardless how they proceeded to do it, they did not get data where they got an effect. If you don't get an effect, you don't have a thesis. So you really have to give serious thought once you're in a PhD program to what do I have to do to complete this program? What do I have to learn? Now, there's another kind of program, just to show you by comparison, where you can tell people how long it will take. It's called the PsyD program, the Doctor of Psychology program. It is not research-based, it's experience-based. And so what you're expected to do is a number of settings where you get a chance to work with people in an applied area. They will mentor you. At the end of 4 years' time, you may have to write a paper, sort of a library paper, but you can see with pretty good assurance that, in fact, at the end of 4 years, you will be able to get a PsyD degree. In New York State, does it matter? At the present moment, the answer is no. At the present moment, people who have PhD degrees, who go for licensure, have the same opportunity that people who have PsyD degrees who go for licensure. Now, think about it. The number of people that graduate from the PhD program, pretty small. Maybe, of course, it depends upon the program, but maybe we're talking about less than a dozen. The number of people that graduate from PsyD programs, on the other hand, just any one program might be anywhere between 60 and 80, depending upon how many programs there are. Just multiply the number of programs, and you can see that there are going to be a lot of PsyDs out there, and not a lot of PhDs. PhD programs feel threatened by this. Now, they've tried to do some things about changing licensing requirements. So far, it hasn't happened. It's not clear whether it ever will. But I think you should just know that there's nothing wrong with this PsyD degree. It's a different kind of training. And for some people, it gives them the opportunity to do the kinds of work that they want to do. Now, PhD programs tend to provide a lot of student support. It may take various forms. There are fellowships. I'll be showing you a handout which you can take, which gives you some sense of the likelihood of getting support. PhD programs do have, as I say, a lot more support than you can expect with PsyD programs. Ask yourself, why do PsyD programs even exist? They exist because, let's take a case in point. You can pick this up later. This information is a couple of years old, but it certainly makes the point. And I'm not trying to scare you. This is a reality check, okay? But this list is in the metropolitan area. Of course, everybody here who's thinking about graduate school thinks that they don't want to leave the metropolitan area. I'll tell you now that that makes it even harder. So where do I want to go? I want to go to CUNY. CUNY is the least expensive program, right? So CUNY is for me. Where do I want to apply? Well, if you think about clinical, this was in 2012. Clinical received 274 applications. Okay, so you say, oh, kind of a big number. What percentage of those applications did they accept? 4%. They accepted 10 people. What does it mean? It means that 264 people did not make it. Okay? So, there's a market there, right? All these people want to be clinicians. 264 of them. I could fill all these classes with 264 students, right? So, this is how this ID was born. You don't need laboratories because it's not research-oriented. So you can take in lots of students. Classes are big. Classes are 60 or more sometimes. As I say, the good news is at the end of 4 years, if you do your work, you'll end up with a degree. It is not as competitive as getting into PhD programs, true, but there's a price that you pay. Now, having said that, now PsyD programs are not easy to get into. I hate to give numbers here, but maybe the best way to do it is to introduce these books. Okay, this is the Bible, but unfortunately this is last year's Bible. This year's Bible comes off the printer, I think, this weekend. It's available from Amazon. It's available, the book is Graduate Study in Psychology. You'll notice it says 2014, this year. The new one will say 2015. It's published by the American Psychological Association. I don't remember how much they charge, $28 maybe, $26 or $28, something like that. You can do a lot better at Amazon. You can do better at Walmart. We will have a new copy when it does come off the printer. It's been ordered. We'll have it in the psych office. We'll write psych department on it so people don't steal it, hopefully. You want to come and take a look at it. There is one thing that I do recommend, though, and that is there's a section at the end here. A lot of people say, I'm not sure what I want to do. I would like to go to graduate school, but I'm not sure what. There's something here that might help you a little bit. And that is, at the very end of the book, there's a section that is called Index of Programs by Area of Study Offered. And for those people who are sitting up close, they can see that there are certain bold headings, and then there are lists of schools. Obviously, people in the back can't see that, but let me just sort of give you a sense of the bold headings. I can't read them all, of course, but for example, the very first one says Applied Behavior Analysis. There's a listing of maybe, this is just a quick guess, 20 schools. It identifies the names of the schools and the programs that they offer. The next one is behavioral psychology. There's a listing there of maybe 45. There's child and adolescent psychology, a listing of maybe 25. Clinical is a very long listing, as you would expect. Maybe 100 schools. Cognitive, community counseling, you get the idea, right? So the first thing I recommend you do, if you're not sure, is simply go to the end of the book, just read the bold headings and say, which of these bold headings comes closest to what I think I want to do. Do I want to work with people, or with animals, do I want to work in this particular setting? Do I want to do counseling? People who are thinking about along clinical lines, I think should include counseling as an option. The reason being that clinical is so competitive, that counseling is probably, the way counselors are treated in terms of training is not very different from the way clinical psychologists are trained. In fact, if I had a room with a counselor and a client here, and a clinician and a client here, and I asked you which is which, I think your probability of being right is about 50%. So, in terms of training, the training is similar. In terms of stature, I think the clinician still has some advantage over the counselor. But in any event, you go through this section, you find the various titles that appeal to you, and that then prepares you to take a closer look at the programs. And that's what really the core of this book is. It lists by state the various programs. And what it lists here, the reason this is the Bible, even though it's last year's Bible, is it gives you a lot of information. It will tell you the number of faculty, how many men, how many women, how many part-timers, what degrees are offered, how many degrees are actually awarded, what they expect in the way of applications. Some of them will tell you the kinds of scores that they're looking for on the GREs. Some of them will tell you the characteristics of the student, the demographics of the student. It goes into really a lot of detail about each and every program. It tells you tuition. It tells you what kind of financial assistance is available. I mean, this is a lot of valuable information. So what you have to do is you have to do your homework. You have to decide, first of all, if you're limited geographically, where you're willing to look. You go to those schools and you search and you get as much information as you can possibly get. You go online and look at their websites. And now let me make a suggestion. And that is, if you're applying to a school that is not outrageously far away, and you have good credentials, and that's very important, what good credentials are. I mean, you really need excellent GPAs, among other things. But what I recommend that you do is you call up and you say, I would like to visit. And most places will say, fine, come, we'll set up a time for you to visit. And what I would recommend that you do is you do your homework in advance. You know who their faculty are. You know the research areas of the various faculty members. You go out of your way so that when you come in, you can't say, do you have anybody doing this? You say, well, gee, I'd like to meet with Dr. So-and-so because she's really doing this stuff that interests me. It is like a military operation. You have to come in fully prepared. Now, talk to graduate students. Graduate students will tell you the truth. Faculty tell you the way they would like it to be. Graduate students tell you the way it is, realizing that a graduate student's lot is not a happy one. So just because you find one graduate student that is unhappy, find out why. Ask, why aren't you happy? But as I say, faculty are going to describe everything. Everything's rosy, everything's good. And it may indeed be, but I think students will tell you the way things really are. Okay, so let's talk about credentials. GPAs I have talked about. The classic question that I cannot answer is what kind of GPA do I need to apply to clinical programs? I can't tell you that. All I can say is it has to be super. Different schools define super in different ways, and I can't tell you that there's any one commonality. Every school has its own way of deciding who they're going to take. I'm going to give you two different examples. One example, which I believe is still done, is that they have looked back over the last 10 years. They've constructed a mathematical model. And the mathematical model says, okay, here is a formula that we're going to plug in numbers. We're going to plug in what is the student's GPA at the school that they were last at, and what is the fudge factor for that school. So if you went to a classy school, you get a good fudge factor. If you went to a not so classy school, you get a lower fudge factor. Plus, they then figure out, all right, how did you do on the GREs? And they have a weighting factor for the verbal, a weighting factor for the analytic. I don't quite understand what that weighting factor would be, and a weighting factor for the quantitative. And they then, one of the things I haven't talked about is you have to provide letters of recommendation. So they will go through the letters and they will rate them on a scale of 1 to 5. And so they will take whatever the rating happens to be and they will plug that in. And again, there's a fudge factor depending upon, did the letter come from a teacher, did it come from a research supervisor? And at the end of all this, they get a number. And they take the numbers and they put them in descending order and they say, how many students are we going to take? We're going to take 8. We draw the line at 8. Okay, so that's the way one school does it. A school not too far from here does it totally differently. This is their clinical program. They decide on their top 20. They invite the top 20 to come in on a weekend day, like Saturday or Sunday. And they pair them off. They say, okay, 2 of you sit there, 2 of you sit there, until they have 10 tables. And And then they'll say, okay, the person on the left interviews the person on the right. And in the meantime, the faculty kind of wander around listening to how it goes. That will go on for between about 15 minutes. And then at the end of 15 minutes, they make a noise and they say, okay, switch roles. And now the interviewee becomes the interviewer and so on. 15 minutes, the individual will say, thank you, goodbye. And on the basis of that, they decide who they are going to take. So that's why I can't give you a really neat formula that's going to get you into any graduate program. Everyone has its own, I picked extremes of course, but everyone has its own rules. And sometimes you can find out what those rules are and sometimes you can't. Okay, so we mentioned GPAs. We mentioned that you need letters of recommendation. Now, how many letters of recommendation should I ask for? Clearly, the letters should come from faculty members who know you. People would like me as chair to write a letter, and I say, as you know, I can't say a lot. I mean, the information that I can say is available to them in all other forms. Like I can say, yeah, you did well, but I really can't say anything more than that. So the more personal the letter, the more, if you're in a class of 140 and you got an A, but the faculty member just knows your name, that's not going to carry a lot of weight unless that person really knows you, unless you've had some interactions with that person, and so that person can write a letter saying, yeah, it was a huge class, but I remember her because. Those letters help. Clearly, if you get letters, most places will ask for 3 letters. So the question is, can I ask for a 4th letter? And the answer is, yeah, you can do it. It doesn't hurt. My best advice is to have at least 2 letters come from faculty because they want to know how you're going to do in their graduate program. They want to know how you are going to perform in class. And so that's why those letters should come from faculty. Now, some of you are doing work on the outside where there is some sort of supervisor who is, overseeing your work. One letter from the supervisor is fine. Don't send 2. They want the faculty recommendation just as much as they want the supervisor's recommendation, if not more. So, at least 2 letters from faculty. Please, no letters from family members. You laugh. No letters from high school teachers. No letters from high school principals. Unless you happen to be working at the school and doing something that is somehow related to the program that you're applying to, then it might make sense. But in any event, those letters count. It really counts if the reviewer knows the writer. And I'm saying this, I've been on an admissions committee for a long time. And if I get a letter from somebody that I know, and this person says something really good, I tend to give it a little more weight than somebody who I don't know. It makes sense. You would do that with your friends too. Your friend tells you something, you say, sure. Somebody else tells it to you, you say, well, maybe. So, it's the same kind of thing. So, GPA counts, letters count, GREs count. And now we have 2 other things to mention that are very important. One thing is trying to get involved with research. Working in somebody's lab, and it doesn't matter what the lab happens to be doing at the time. The lab may be cutting up brains and you're thinking you want to go into clinical psychology. That will count just as much as if you had clinical research experience. Because the research laboratory gives you a certain amount of training in how to look at things. Clinical programs look at courses like 213, experimental, and the advanced lab courses as important because they want graduates from their clinical programs to be consumers of research. They want people to be able to read what's going on now so they can take the most recent stuff and use it, rather than simply take what they learned in school and practice that for the rest of their lifetime. So, research is important, A letter from a research supervisor carries some weight. If possible, if you can get involved with a project long enough to get your name on a paper, that is coin of the realm. That is going to do a lot for you. And maybe even if your grades are not the greatest, that can make the difference. If you get your name on a poster, that can help. Anything that is related to the research area that somehow you can tell people what it is that you learned and what it is that you've done in some public forum, that will really help. So if you can get yourself involved in research, I strongly recommend it. So how do you do it? The best way to do it at Queens College is to take some faculty member who knows you, in whose class you have been, and you go to that person and you say, I'm really interested in getting a laboratory research experience. Do you have any room for me in your laboratory? Because we have so many majors and so few faculty, I can't tell you what the odds are, but I will tell you that that's the best way to do it. If you approached me and you said, gee, I'd like to work in your lab, not knowing you, I'd say my first response is, who you? But somebody who knows you, I think you have a lot better chance of getting involved in that person's research. So by all means, that's the route to go. But the second thing that you should be doing is looking for volunteer opportunities. The form of the volunteer opportunity, I would hope, would be somewhat related to psychology. Sometimes you have to find a way to spin it, but more often than not, psychology tries to talk about every aspect of human existence, so there should be some easy way to spin it. But doing volunteer work over the course of time really tells you a lot about psychology that isn't in books.